We were out camping for the weekend. A few friends, some beer, nothing fancy. Just one of those public campgrounds with a bunch of little sites spread out along a loop road. The place was basically empty except for us and maybe one other group way down by the entrance. Our site was tucked near the back, close to the tree line, with a couple of old, unused sites around it. Two weird things happened that night, both involving the same friend, and both while I was heading off to use the bathroom. The first time was around 10 p.m. We'd been sitting by the fire for a while, drinking and talking, when I felt my stomach start doing that "you need to find a bathroom now" thing. The restrooms were about a quarter mile away along the main path. Not far, but far enough that I had to actually leave the glow of our fire and walk into complete darkness. I grab my flashlight and head out. As I'm walking, I see movement ahead. Someone stepping out from a side path that leads to one of the unused campsites. It's about 50 yards before the turnoff for our site, so that caught me off guard. It's my friend. He has this really noticeable gait, like a little uneven in his step, so it's not exactly hard to recognize him. I call out, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" He turns his head back, squints in the dark, and says, "Why are you following me?" He's a good 40 feet ahead, so I just tell him, "I told you, I'm going to the bathroom. Why'd you come from a different site?" He doesn't answer, just picks up his pace. I keep walking at my normal speed, but every so often he glances back again and repeats, "Why are you following me?" Same tone, same pace, never stopping. By the time I get close to the restrooms, he's completely gone. I figure maybe he's just screwing with me, ran ahead to hide or something. I go in, do my business, and walk back. When I get to our site, there he is, sitting by the fire with everyone else like nothing happened. I ask him straight up, "Why'd you come from the other site earlier?" And he just looks at me blank, swears he hasn't left since I went to the bathroom. Everyone else backs him up. They all say he's been there the whole time. Okay, whatever. I figure maybe I was seeing things, maybe the shadows messed with me. No big deal. Fast forward to around 3 a.m. I wake up in my tent and have to pee. This time, I don't feel like walking all the way to the bathrooms, so I decide to just step into the woods a bit. I grab a flashlight, go about 20 feet in, do what I have to do again, and come back. As I'm walking toward the tents, I hear the sound of a zipper, clear as day, like someone opening their tent. I look over, and in the dim light, I can tell it's my friend's tent. I see a figure crouching, zipping it back up. The figure stands, and now I can see it's him. Same build, same hair, same gait as he walks a few steps toward the fire pit. He stops, pulls something from his pocket, and I hear the click, click, click of a lighter. The flint sparks light up his face for just a split second, definitely him. He tries again, and the lighter catches. The glow lights his face even more clearly, and I see him take a drag from a cigarette. Then he turns his head toward me and says, "Can you hear me?" I stop and say, "Yeah, I can hear you. What's up?" He tilts his head slightly and repeats it louder. "Can you hear me?" This time, it's almost like he's calling out to test if someone's awake. I laugh a little and say, "You trying to wake everyone up?" He just kind of shakes his head, turns and walks toward the cars, parked a little ways down the road. I follow, figuring he's messing with me again. He rounds the back of one of the cars, and I'm maybe 30 feet behind him. When I turn the same corner, he's gone. Not ducked down behind something, gone. Just gone. No sound of footsteps, no movement. Now I'm irritated. I figure he's hiding, so I walk straight back to his tent to call him out. But when I get there, the tent flap is closed tight, and I can hear him inside snoring. I stand there for a few seconds, just listening. The snoring is steady. No way he ran back and zipped himself in that quickly without me hearing it. I woke him up the next morning and asked if he'd been out at all during the night. He swore he hadn't left the tent once after going to bed, and he didn't sound like he was lying. I don't know what I saw out there twice, but it looked exactly like him. Same voice, same walk, same face in the glow of that lighter. I'd had a few drinks earlier in the night, sure, but nowhere near enough to hallucinate. And whatever it was real enough to look me in the eye, talk to me, and then disappear like it never existed. A couple years ago, a buddy and I decided to do some midweek camping in the backwoods of Idaho. We're both into the kind of trips where you actually get away from everything. Not a campground with other people 100 feet away, but real, deep woods, middle of nowhere kind of camping. The nearest town was barely a blip on the map, maybe 600 people, and it was about an hour's drive from where we set up. Once we got to the trailhead, we still had to drive a couple miles up an unmarked dirt road to even reach the spot we picked. We picked a little clearing just big enough for a tent, with a steep tree-covered slope on one side and a view of the valley on the other. No trails, no cabins, nothing. Just the sound of the wind in the pines and a few birds here and there. We got there late in the afternoon, maybe around 6:30 or 7. The sun was just starting to sink, so we got the tent up quick, hauled some firewood over, and got a fire going. It was one of those perfect camping evenings. Cool air, smell of pine, nothing but forest around us. After a while, we had some hot dogs going on sticks over the fire, passing around a bag of Cheetos and a couple sodas, just talking about nothing in particular. It got dark fast, no light pollution out there, so the fire was the only thing keeping the night back. The flames crackling, that soft hiss from the wood, it was just one of those peaceful moments. Then we heard it. Up the mountain from where we were, maybe 100 yards at first, we heard the sound of something moving through the brush. Not like a squirrel or a rabbit. These were heavy steps. We could hear branches snapping, the crunch of leaves underfoot. We both went quiet and just listened. The sound stopped. No movement. Nothing. The kind of silence where you can hear your own pulse in your ears. We sat there for maybe 30 seconds, shrugged it off, and went back to talking. Probably just a deer, right? Except as soon as we started talking again, the noises started up again. The same thing. Branches snapping, brush being pushed through, but this time, closer. We shut up again, and just like before, silence. Now we're looking at each other like, okay, that's weird. We're not city kids. We've camped plenty. We know the usual noises. And usually if it's an animal, it keeps moving whether you're talking or not. But this, it was like it was listening to us. We talked again, this time on purpose, just to see what would happen. Sure enough, the noises started again, closer still, maybe 50 yards now. This happened a few more times. We'd talk. It would move. We'd stop. It would stop. The pattern was too perfect. We weren't imagining it. By the fourth time, whatever it was had closed the distance to maybe 200 feet. That's not far when you can't see past the tree line and you've only got the fire for light. At that point, we're both pretty on edge. We'd brought rifles with us, planned to do some target shooting the next day. So I got up, walked over to the truck, and grabbed mine. I wasn't pointing it at anything, but my gut was telling me this wasn't something to just ignore. We sat there for another minute, not talking, just scanning the tree line. No sound, no movement, just the fire, crackling. Then I said something to my buddy, and right on cue, there it was again. Same sound, even closer, pushing through the brush like it knew exactly where we were. That's when I decided enough was enough. I stood up, racked around, and fired a shot straight up into the air. For half a second, nothing. Then whatever it was, and I swear on my life this is true, it took off uphill in the pitch black, and it moved so fast. You could hear the branches breaking in rapid bursts, like it was clearing insane ground with each step. I've hunted before. I've seen elk take off. I've seen bears run. This wasn't that. Whatever it was covered maybe 400 feet in under half a minute, straight up a dense, brush-covered slope in total darkness. No hesitation, no stumbling, just gone. We stood there listening until we couldn't hear it anymore. The only sound left was the fire and the wind in the trees. Neither of us wanted to say it out loud, but we both knew that wasn't normal. Elk don't freeze perfectly when you stop talking. Bears don't move like they're pacing you. And no human is running that fast, that far uphill in the dark without breaking their neck. We didn't sleep much that night, just sat by the fire with our rifles, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. By morning, it almost felt like it hadn't happened at all, except we both remembered it exactly the same way. We packed up early and got the hell out of there. Haven't been back since. I used to go camping a lot with a couple of close friends in the El Dorado National Forest. We had this one spot along Sopiago Springs we went to so often it felt like our place. Tucked away, far enough off the beaten path that we'd never run into anyone else. One weekend, we decided to do a 3-day foraging trip, sort of a survival-style thing. We brought some MREs just in case we couldn't find enough food, a couple of rifles, and the basics to set up shelter. That was it. The first night was actually great. My buddy managed to shoot a squirrel, and we caught a bunch of crawdads from the stream. We cooked them over the fire, had a few beers we'd packed in, and just enjoyed the night. Slept fine. The next day, something just felt off. It's hard to explain, but the forest felt wrong. One of the guys there had been with me before when we'd had some weird experiences in that same area, so he picked up on it too. The forest was completely still. No birds, no insects, no rustling. Just dead quiet. If you've spent enough time in the woods, you know that silence usually means a predator is around. But this didn't feel like that. I've been around bears, even mountain lions, and the tension is different. This felt like being watched, but by something that wasn't hiding out of fear. More like it was deciding what to do with you. That night, my two friends went maybe 200 yards up the stream to check out a spot they'd seen earlier. I stayed behind at camp. Almost immediately, the feeling ramped up. The hair on my arms was standing straight up. I threw more wood on the fire to get it blazing and grabbed one of the rifles. I realized too late that they'd taken both flashlights with them. Bad planning on our part. Then I started hearing it. Faint voices. Not from the direction they'd gone. Completely opposite. At first I thought maybe it was just the sound of water playing tricks on me. But no, these were voices. Low, indistinct voices, like people talking just far enough away that you couldn't make out the words. I kept scanning the dark tree line, but the firelight didn't reach far. The shadows out there just swallowed everything. And then I caught movement. About 50 yards out between the trees, something shifted. My gut reaction was to throw the rifle up and look through the scope. The fire was the only light source, so I couldn't see much detail, but I could see the outline. It looked human, sort of. But it was on all fours, and the arms were way too long. The posture was wrong, low to the ground, kind of like an ape. I only had a second or two to take it in before it moved. Not like it was startled, just a quick, smooth loping motion deeper into the forest. That was enough for me. My adrenaline was spiking. I kept the rifle up and started slowly turning in a circle, listening. A minute later, I heard movement again. This time from my left, then a rustle from my right, then behind me. It wasn't circling. There were little noises in different spots, like it was darting around just outside the firelight. Every sound was coming from the same general side of camp, still opposite from where my friends had gone. By now, I was pretty sure it was stalking me. And I don't mean like a curious animal. I've had coyotes do that. They stay in one place, they watch. This felt like it was trying to figure out how close it could get without me noticing. I kept feeding the fire to push the light further. I was sitting there, gun in hand, trying not to blink too long. When my friends finally came back, They could tell immediately something was wrong, probably because I was glassing the tree line like I was waiting for something to step into the open. I told them what I'd seen, and they got quiet. Then they told me they'd started hearing the same thing while they were upriver, only from their side of the forest. That's why they cut their trip short and came back when they did. That night, we didn't take any chances. We kept the fire huge, and we took turns watching the tree line. None of us slept. Every little sound kept us on edge. As soon as the sun started coming up, we packed up the camp as fast as we could. I've never broken a camp so quickly in my life. We never went back to that spot again. And even now, years later, I still can't decide what creeps me out more, that thing I saw or the fact that whatever it was had more than one voice. About 2 years ago, I drove home late from a family reunion. It was a 2-hour drive, and I didn't stay over because I had work the next morning. The route had no towns, just a narrow 2-lane road with heavy brush and tall trees pressed right up to the edge. It had no streetlights, no houses, and every now and then I'd see a mailbox with no driveway. Most of the time, it was only my headlights and whatever showed up in the beams at the last second. Road signs, reflective posts, pale tree trunks. 45 minutes in, I hit a wall. 1 second I felt fine. The next, I could barely keep my eyes open. It wasn't normal fatigue. It felt like my body just shut down. I rolled the window down and let cold air slap me and blasted the radio, but nothing helped. I knew I shouldn't keep going, but there wasn't anywhere safe to stop. No gas station, no rest areas, just dark woods. I started looking for a spot where I wouldn't be right on the road. Eventually, I saw a break in the brush and pulled off. The tires bumped over soft grass, and I nosed the car behind some bushes, not hidden, but less obvious from the road. I turned the hazards on for a second, then switched them off. I didn't want to draw attention. I locked the doors, checked the time, 11:22, and leaned the seat back. I told myself I'd only nap for 10 minutes. I woke up to a faint scratching sound. The clock said 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds. I was so tired that I convinced myself it was branches or maybe an animal brushing past. I didn't even look, I just went back to sleep. The next time I woke, it was the same sound. A steady dragging across the door, then along the rear panel. It would pause and start again. The clock said 12:40. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. Something had come back after almost an hour. I tried to tell myself it was an animal, but the timing didn't make sense. I lifted my head and looked into the rearview mirror. At first, I only saw the faint outline of trees in the dark. Then I caught movement, something slipping back into the woods. I didn't see a clear shape, just a shadow moving low and quick. My stomach dropped. I started the car right away, shifted into drive and pulled out. I didn't floor it, but I picked up speed as I went. Less than 100 yards up there was a bend. As I rounded it, my headlights lit up another car pulled over on the shoulder. The driver's door was hanging open. No hazards, no dome light, no movement. It looked empty, but fresh. I slowed just enough to glance in. I didn't see anyone inside. I drove past and checked my mirror. At first, the road was empty. Then a man suddenly sprinted into the lane from beyond the bend. He was running full speed straight toward me. I cracked the window a little and heard him shouting for me to get out of the car. He wasn't asking for help. He was ordering me like he had authority. The tone was sharp, aggressive. I hit the gas and left him behind. I didn't stop again. I watched the mirrors for a long time. I only relaxed when the trees pulled back and there were actual lights. I merged onto a bigger road and only then noticed my hands shaking on the wheel. When I got home, I parked under the light in front of my building and walked around the car. On the rear door and quarter panel, there were 3 thin lines, not deep gouges, more like something rough had scraped the paint. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I checked again in daylight. The marks were there, each one about the length of my forearm. The spacing looked deliberate, not random. I kept thinking about the timing, 11:50, then 12:40. If the first sound was random, the second felt planned. For the next week, I kept replaying the drive in my head. The open door, the hidden movement near my car, the man sprinting out after I passed. It fit together too well. One person waits by the staged car. Another creeps up on me, scratches to see if I move, then slips away. When I pull back onto the road, I pass the setup. The man runs out screaming to make me stop. If I had pulled over for the open car, I would have been boxed in, maybe robbed, maybe worse. I didn't report it. What would I say? A guy told me to get out of my car? The cops would ask why I was parked on the grass in the middle of the night. They'd tell me not to sleep on rural roads, and they'd be right. I regret pulling over, but I also think about how close I came to stepping out when I saw that open door. If I had, I probably wouldn't have made it to the highway. Since then, I don't nap on the road. If I'm tired, I push to a gas station with lights and people around. I keep pepper spray in the car now, and I trust that gut feeling I had. That wasn't nerves. It was my brain warning me something was wrong. People like to think horror lives in empty places. Sometimes it's just in the setup. An open car door, a scratch on the paint. That night wasn't a ghost story. It was someone with a plan for whoever stopped. I almost played into it. I'm glad I didn't. If you ever feel yourself fading on a dark road, don't pull into the bushes. Keep driving until you find light. And if someone runs out of the dark yelling for you to get out, don't stop. Just keep driving. My wife and I were in the middle of moving between cities. We had spent the entire day loading a 16-foot trailer with everything we owned. By the time we got the last box inside, the sun was gone and the sky was fading to dark. I had borrowed a big pickup truck to pull the trailer, and with how much we had packed, the rig was incredibly heavy. The truck was sluggish when it started moving, slow to climb speed, and it took forever to stop. I knew driving at night with that much weight was going to be rough, but we didn't have another choice. We headed out across the state, and by midnight we were deep into a desolate stretch of highway. It was 2 lanes wide, flat and empty, and we hadn't seen another car in what felt like an hour. My wife had fallen asleep on the bench seat beside me, curled up with her head against the door while I kept my focus on the road. The truck rumbled steady at 60, maybe 65, and the only light came from the headlights pushing forward into the black. Then I spotted movement in the distance. 2 shapes stepped into the road, maybe 200 yards ahead. At first I thought they were deer. That's normal for the area, so I eased off the gas, tapped the brakes, and laid on the horn. Usually that's enough to send deer running. I wasn't panicking, not yet, but as the headlights reached them, I realized they weren't deer at all. They were men. 2 grown men standing directly in the road. One stood in my lane, the other stood in the opposite lane. They had positioned themselves so I couldn't go left or right. They were trying to stop us. Instantly I knew this was bad. With the weight of the trailer, there was no way I could bring the truck to a full stop in time. The rig was simply too heavy, and I was already closing in fast. They must not have understood how impossible it was for me to stop before reaching them. I slammed on the brake pedal anyway, the truck shuddering and tires screaming against the asphalt. The trailer fishtailed and tugged hard at the back, threatening to jackknife. I blasted the horn again and again, hoping to scare them into moving. But neither of them budged. They just stood there, staring me down as I came closer, still rolling at 35, maybe 40 miles an hour. At that point, I realized I had one option. I centered the truck in the middle of the 2 lanes, aiming dead between them, praying neither one decided to close that gap. I gripped the wheel and braced myself. At the very last second, the man in my lane jumped aside. He was so close I thought for sure the side mirror would catch his head. I missed him by inches. Then we were past them. It was over in seconds. From the time I realized they weren't deer to the moment I cleared them, maybe 5 to 8 seconds had passed. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I kept expecting to see headlights in the rear view, maybe a car they had hidden, but the highway was empty. No vehicles, no sign of a breakdown. Just two men in the middle of nowhere at midnight, trying to force us to stop. Based on how they acted, I have no doubt they were planning something. Robbery, hijacking, who knows? But it wasn't good. I didn't pull over. I kept my foot steady and forced myself not to look back again. My chest felt like it was going to burst. I was shaking and struggling to breathe, and for a moment, all I could think about was how close I had come to killing one of them, or how close they had come to stopping us. It wasn't until a minute later that I noticed my wife wasn't sitting beside me anymore. When I had hit the brakes that hard, she'd been thrown off the seat and onto the floor. This was before seatbelts were required, so she had nothing holding her in place. She groggily pushed herself back up, rubbing her head, and asked me what had happened. She had missed the entire ordeal. I just shook my head and told her to go back to sleep. I didn't want to explain, not while my hands were still trembling on the wheel. The rest of the drive, I couldn't shake the image of those two men, standing perfectly still, blocking both lanes, waiting for us to reach them. There was no car, no broken down vehicle, no reason for them to be there at midnight in the middle of nowhere. They weren't stranded. They weren't looking for help. They were trying to make us stop. I kept driving until I saw the glow of another town on the horizon, and only then did I let myself breathe easier. But that night has stayed with me ever since. I don't know what their plan was, and I'm glad I never found out. All I know is if I'd managed to stop that truck, things could have ended very differently. It was late at night, sometime around 1 a.m, and my buddy and I were parked outside a little 24-hour pizza place. We weren't driving around, just sitting in my car, waiting for the order to be ready. The lot was mostly empty except for a couple of cars on the far side. The glow from the shop's neon sign lit up the front row, but where we were parked, the light didn't quite reach. I remember we were just talking, killing time. I think I was rambling about some movie we'd watched earlier, giving a half-baked hot take trying to make him laugh. My buddy wasn't really responding. At first I figured he was just tired, zoning out while I kept going. Then I noticed he was staring at me. That might not sound strange, but this guy never looked people in the eye. He was one of those guys who would glance at you for half a second and then look away again. Eye contact made him uncomfortable. So when I saw him locked on me eyes wide, it was immediately off. I stopped mid-sentence and asked, "Dude, what's up?" He didn't say anything. He just raised his hand and pointed past me, toward my window. Right outside my window, not even a foot away, was a man. I hadn't heard him approach. He was bent forward, his face inches from the glass, lunging toward it like he'd just stopped himself at the very last second before smashing into it. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly twisted open, like he'd been caught in the middle of something. For half a second, he didn't move. He just held that position, face almost pressed to the glass, and stared right at me. Then he straightened up and stumbled back a few steps. He turned without a word and jogged off across the lot, disappearing into the shadows near the street. I turned back to my friend, heart pounding, and asked, "What the hell was that?" He finally blinked, still pale, and explained why he'd frozen. Apparently the man had first walked by glancing in at us. Then he stopped, backed up a few steps, and suddenly started sprinting straight at the car. My buddy saw him sprinting toward us, but by the time he could react, the guy was already right there. He had been a split second away from slamming full force into the side of the car. The only thing that stopped him was me turning my head at the exact moment my friend pointed. It was like being caught ruined whatever he was about to do, and he pulled up short, stopping half an inch from my window. I sat there trying to piece it together, but the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. If he was just some drunk or someone messing with us, why sprint at a parked car in the middle of the night? And why stop so suddenly the second we both looked at him? The pizza place was only a few yards away. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting him to circle back or come at us again. Every shadow outside the glow of the neon looked like it could be him waiting. My buddy was rattled too. He didn't even want to get out of the car when our order was ready. We debated just leaving it, but hunger won. When we finally went inside, we made sure to stick close together, scanning the lot the whole time. The guy was nowhere in sight. On the drive back, the mood was completely different. Neither of us talked much. Every time headlights appeared behind us, I checked the mirror to make sure it wasn't him following. I even circled the block once before pulling up at my friend's place, just in case. To this day, I won't sit in a parked car late at night without checking my mirrors every few seconds. And every time I pass a 24-hour pizza place, I remember that empty parking lot and the man who came running out of the dark for no reason. I work at a small gas station out in the backwoods of Tennessee. It sits on an old 2-lane stretch of road that hardly anyone uses anymore. Back in the day, before they built the new freeway about 10 years ago, this road was busy. Restaurants, a couple of motels, a few shops. Now, almost every business here is gone. The buildings just sitting there, slowly rotting away. Most are boarded up, but a few have broken windows or busted doors, and every so often you'll see some of the local junkies wander in and claim a place for a while. When it gets dark, the whole stretch feels dead. Last night, I clocked in at 8 p.m. The parking lot was empty, and inside it was so quiet I could hear the buzz of the ceiling lights over everything else. The only movement was the faint ripple of shadows in the cooler glass when the compressor kicked on. That's how I knew it was going to be a slow night. This road doesn't get many travelers after sunset unless they're lost, desperate for gas, or looking for a bathroom. I've been working here for about a year now. I'm 18, and the night shift has its perks. I can play music, watch videos, scroll my phone, whatever. The only catch is when something happens. It's just me, no backup. Around 11 p.m., I was leaning on the counter, half watching some YouTube video, when I remembered the chip rack was almost empty, which for some reason are the most popular here. I'd put it off all evening because the extra stock isn't in the back room like you'd expect. It's in the basement. I've always hated that basement. The stairs are steep and narrow. The air down there smells like mildew, and the single light bulb over the main floor always seems one flicker away from burning out. The corners are dark no matter what you do, and sound echoes in this weird way that makes it hard to tell where anything's coming from. I never spend more time down there than I have to. Still, I grabbed the basement key, unlocked the heavy wooden door, and started down. The air was noticeably cooler halfway down the steps, and the smell hit me. Dust, cardboard, something damp. The light was already on, casting a pale yellow glow over the shelves and the stacked boxes. I was maybe 5 steps from the bottom when I heard something. First a sharp metallic clink, like something small hitting the concrete. Then the sound of footsteps. At first I froze, trying to figure out if it was just something shifting on the shelves. But the steps kept coming, evenly spaced, moving toward me from the far end of the room. That was all I needed. I spun around and took the stairs 2 at a time, slammed the door shut, locked it, and stepped back. My heart pounding so hard it hurt. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the keys. I went straight for the counter and pulled up the security cameras on the store computer. There's one that points down into the basement from the top of the stairs. When the feed loaded, I felt my stomach twist. There was a man standing dead center in the frame. He was staring directly up at the camera, smiling. Not a normal smile. His eyes were wide, his lips pulled too far back. He didn't look like the usual crowd that drifts through the abandoned buildings. No beard, no ragged layers of clothes. He was clean-shaven, wearing jeans and a light blue button-up. If he'd walked in through the front door, I would have just rung him up without thinking twice. But seeing him down there, in that place, looking right into the lens. It felt wrong in a way I can't explain. I grabbed the phone and called my boss. At first he sounded irritated, but the longer I talked, the quieter he got. Then he said he'd be there in 15 minutes. I asked if I should call the police. He told me no, not yet. Just lock the front door and make sure the guy didn't leave. I locked up and went back to the monitor. The man hadn't moved an inch, still smiling, still staring. 3 minutes later, he shifted. Without breaking eye contact with the camera, he walked sideways out of the frame into the far corner where the light didn't reach. The shadows swallowed him completely. That was worse than before. At least when I could see him, I knew where he was. Now, for all I knew, he could be standing just out of sight or halfway up the stairs. When my boss finally pulled in, I let him in right away. He had a shotgun in his hands, like he'd been expecting trouble. We went down together. The wooden steps groaned under our weight, and I couldn't help scanning the shadows with every step. But there was nothing. No man. No sign anyone had been there at all. Even the floor was undisturbed. No muddy footprints, no moved boxes. Just that damp, heavy air pressing in around us. After a while, my boss shrugged and said I'd probably been tired and imagining things. But I know what I saw. We went back upstairs, and he told me not to worry about it. I nodded, but the rest of the night I kept checking the monitor. I didn't see anything else, but the image of that smile wouldn't leave my head. I was 18 at the time, living in a small town where nothing really happened. At least, nothing you thought could get you killed. It was summer, I couldn't sleep, and around 4 in the morning, I decided to drive to the gas station for a snack. I figured I'd grab a hot dog, maybe some chips, and head back home. The gas station was one of those quiet, fluorescent lit ones, only one clerk inside, and a couple of pumps. I didn't see another car anywhere, which wasn't unusual at that hour. I went in, got my food, paid, and came back out. I got into my car, cranked the music low, and just sat there in the parking lot eating. It was warm enough to have my driver's window cracked open, maybe 4 inches. A nice breeze was coming through, and everything felt calm. That calm didn't last long. Out of nowhere, there was this sharp tapping on my window. I actually jumped hard enough that I almost dropped my food. My first instinct was to hit the lock button. I turned, and there's this guy standing right next to the door, leaning down slightly to look at me. I didn't recognize him. He looked maybe late 20s or early 30s, messy hair, dark hoodie. His face didn't have any kind of expression. That's what made me be wary. I rolled the window down just a little more, enough to hear him. "What's up?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Get out of the car, man." I blinked at him. "What?" "I'm taking this car," he said flatly. "Get out." That's when I saw it. He wasn't just tapping on the glass with his knuckles. He had a knife, and the blade was actually resting against the window as he spoke. That cold wave hit me instantly, the kind you feel in your chest when your brain realizes you're in real danger. My mind started racing. The lot was empty except for the clerk inside, who didn't seem to be looking our way. No other customers, just me and this guy. And he was standing a step back, almost casual, like he didn't want to look suspicious from inside. But I could see his eyes moving, checking the store, checking me, scanning the area. Every instinct I had was screaming, "Do not get out of this car." If I opened that door, there was nothing stopping him from stabbing me right there. I forced myself to sound calm. "All right, man, just give me a second." I moved my right hand toward the seatbelt latch like I was about to undo it. At the same time, I slid my left hand toward the window controls. It took him a second to notice what I was doing. Then I hit the switch and the window started rolling up. That's when he tried to jab the knife through the gap. The blade didn't make it inside, but it scraped across the glass, leaving this ugly, squealing line. He yanked on the door handle hard, then again. I threw the car in reverse. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the music. He started yelling just this string of words I barely processed and waving the knife around. I backed out fast, and he actually jogged after me for a few steps, but then he stopped. As I pulled onto the street, I glanced toward the gas station window. The clerk was on the phone watching me leave. I flipped the guy off out of sheer adrenaline and took off toward home. I didn't stop until I was parked in my driveway. My hands were shaking so badly, it took me a few tries to pull my phone out and call the police. An officer came to take my statement. He told me they'd already gotten a call from the gas station about the same guy earlier that night, but he'd taken off before they arrived. With both of our descriptions, they had a good idea of who it was, but I never heard anything else after that. For weeks, I kept replaying it in my head, how fast it happened, how easily it could have gone wrong if I'd panicked or gotten out. I'd never really thought about how vulnerable you are sitting in a parked car, even with the doors locked. That was 7 years ago, and I still don't like stopping at gas stations late at night, especially if there aren't other people around. I grew up in a small town, about 6,000 people. Nights there were so quiet you could hear your own footsteps echo off empty houses. My family often took long walks after dark, and we almost never saw anyone else out. We always felt safe. My parents still drilled the "don't talk to strangers" thing into me. I'm short, and at 16 or 17 I looked even younger. They didn't want me wandering into situations I couldn't handle. But back in that town, those warnings felt more like tradition than necessity. Then we moved. Only a few miles away, but to a much bigger town. More traffic, more people, and according to everyone we met, a place with a bad reputation. "Don't go out alone at night," people would say. "This isn't your old neighborhood." I believed them in theory, but nothing had happened yet. That changed one night. It was around 10:30 p.m. My mom's boyfriend had been dealing with a bad stomach ache for hours. He finally asked for Tums. My mom's car was dead in the driveway, so she asked me to take mine. The gas station was less than 5 minutes away. I didn't mind. It was late, but I figured I'd be there and back quickly. The streets were almost completely empty. Streetlights hummed, casting dull yellow halos over the pavement. I passed a few parked cars, but didn't see a single person moving. I pulled into the gas station lot and aimed for a spot close to the entrance. That's when I noticed him, a guy in a dark hoodie standing just off to the side of the front doors. He had one hand up, blocking his eyes from my headlights like they were blinding him. That immediately put me on edge. My headlights are terrible. Even with the brights on, they barely light the road. I slowed down, keeping him in my peripheral vision. He didn't move. I parked, grabbed my keys, and made sure to lock the door before getting out. I didn't look directly at him, just walked quickly toward the entrance. Inside, the place felt dead. No one behind the counter. No customers. The hum of the refrigerators was the only sound. I went straight to the medicine aisle. No Tums, not even a knockoff brand. I scanned the shelves twice, but didn't linger. My skin was crawling. I wanted to leave. Pushing open the door, I froze for half a second. The guy was gone. But there was now a car parked tight next to mine. Close enough, I'd have to squeeze between them to get in. That car hadn't been there before. I slowed my walk for a second, trying to glance casually around the lot. No movement, no sound except the faint buzz from the store's sign. My heartbeat started picking up. A sick, instinctive feeling hit me. I walked faster, eyes scanning without turning my head too much. My truck's old, it has manual locks, and I sit far enough forward that locking the door behind me isn't automatic. But this time, I did it the second I sat down. slammed the door, hit the lock. Not even a heartbeat later, he appeared. He came from behind the car next to mine, moving fast like he'd been crouched down waiting for me. He was at my door instantly, yanking the handle hard enough to shake the truck. Then came the pounding, his fist slamming into the glass again and again. His mouth was moving fast, shouting for me to open up and let him in, mixed with other words I couldn't make out through the glass. I didn't think. I turned the key, the engine roared, and I floored it. Tires squealed as I shot out of the lot, the figure shrinking in my mirror. Halfway down the road, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of the wheel. I didn't slow down until I was nearly across town. I went to another gas station, bought the Tums, and drove straight home. I didn't tell my mom's boyfriend the full story until the next morning. I needed time to process how close I'd come to God knows what. Now, I don't go anywhere alone at night. Not gas stations, not grocery stores, nowhere. Because I keep thinking about that exact second. If I hadn't locked my door right then, he would have been inside before I could even react. So, this was a few years back, when I was in my early 20s. I had two close friends at the time, John and Cam, and we decided we were going to do something kind of dumb but fun. We were going to spend the night in this really old church. I'm talking old, like several hundred years old, creaky wood floors, the works. It's still in use, but at night it's just empty. And the sanctuary, when the lights are off, is basically pitch black. We had permission to be there, so we set up sleeping bags in the basement. Funny enough, the basement was actually kind of cozy. Low ceilings, carpet, a few couches, and folding tables. Definitely more comfortable than the rest of the place. The sanctuary and upper floors felt cold and huge by comparison. Everything was fine until about 3 in the morning. Me and John were still awake, kind of wired, while Cam was in his sleeping bag on the far side of the room. John suggested we go upstairs and check out the sanctuary. It sounded creepy, but I was in the mood for it, so we decided to go. We left the basement and went through the little side hallway that connects to the sanctuary's front doors. We stepped in, and right away, the difference in atmosphere hit me. It was freezing compared to the basement, and the air smelled like old wood and dust. Some faint light leaked in through the cracks around the doors and the small stained glass windows, just enough so we could make out shapes, the outlines of the pews, the center aisle stretching way into the dark. You couldn't see the pulpit at all. It was just this big black void up ahead. We stood there for a minute, letting our eyes adjust. Then John smirks and dares me to walk all the way up to the front. I didn't want to look like a chicken, so I said, "Sure," and started walking. I kept my pace slow, partly because I couldn't see that well, and partly because I had this horrible mental image. Like any second, a hand was going to shoot out from under one of the pews and grab my ankle. My heart was pounding. The sound of my footsteps on the wood seemed way too loud in that silence. I was maybe 3/4 of the way down the aisle when there was this sudden, loud bang from my right. It echoed in the empty room, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned and bolted straight back to the door where John was. That's when we heard laughing coming from above us. Turns out, Cam had snuck up into the balcony while we were in the basement, grabbed a box of tissues, and threw it down to scare me. I was furious, but also relieved. We yelled at him for being an idiot, then all headed back to the basement. We hung out for a bit longer, but maybe 20 minutes later, me and John got the urge to try the sanctuary again. This time, I told him I wasn't going down the aisle alone. We got to the top of the basement stairs, and I motioned for him to wait. I had this feeling Cam might try to follow us and mess with us again. Sure enough, after a few seconds, I see him at the bottom of the stairs tiptoeing up, looking at his feet so he doesn't make a sound. He's about halfway up when he finally looks up and sees us just standing there watching him. He freezes for a split second, realizes we've caught him, and then, because he's still committed to the bit, lets out this blood-curdling scream. Even though I knew it was coming the moment I saw his face, it still made my stomach drop. The sound was so sharp in the quiet. We all laughed a little nervously, and he went back to his sleeping bag. Me and John continued into the sanctuary. We stood at the back again, and I tried to convince him to walk to the front this time, but he flat out refused. Nowhere's something important to know about that church. The pews are really old, solid wood, heavy. When someone sits in one, it makes a deep, long creak. You can't miss it. We were just standing there, whispering, when out of nowhere, all the pews on the left side of the sanctuary creaked at the exact same time. Not one or two, all of them. It sounded exactly like a full congregation had just sat down at once. The sound went down the line in a wave, like weight was actually pressing the seats. I froze. My first thought was that it had to be Cam again, but there's no way. We had just seen him in the basement minutes ago, and there was no way he could have run upstairs without passing us. I didn't even think. We just turned and bolted down the hallway back to the basement. Cam was still lying in his sleeping bag, looking half asleep. We told him what happened, and he swore up and down it wasn't him. And the thing is, I believe him. There's no back staircase, no way in from outside that wouldn't have made noise. And it wasn't random creaks from the wood settling. It was all at once, like a coordinated movement. To this day, I can't explain it. I've been in that church dozens of times since, but I've never heard anything like it again. I was around 10 or 11 when this happened. Back then, I lived in an old one-story house with my grandfather and my older brother. It wasn't a creepy house. It had its quirks, sure. Slightly uneven floors, doors that didn't always close all the way. But to me, it just felt lived in. I never thought about ghosts or hauntings. I was a happy kid, more focused on cartoons, exploring the woods near our place, and finding new ways to annoy my brother than worrying about anything supernatural. I'd heard other people tell scary stories, but they always sounded made up to me. The house was just home. I had this habit of sleeping on the couch in the living room instead of my bed. I liked being out there. The faint orange glow from the street lamp outside leaked through the curtains, painting the walls in soft light. From the kitchen, the fridge hummed in a slow, steady rhythm. The couch smelled faintly of the old fabric cleaner my grandpa used. It all felt safe and familiar. But one night, for some reason, I just couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling. I tried pulling the blanket over my head, then kicking it off. Nothing worked. After a while, I decided to give up and do what I usually did when I was restless: go down the hall and bother my brother. His room was at the very end of a long hallway. At night, it felt even longer, like the darkness stretched out farther than it should have. The walls seemed to swallow the faint light from the living room. I walked down to his door, pushed it open, and stepped inside. He was lying on his bed, still awake, fiddling with something in his hands. I sat down at the edge of the bed, and we started talking. Nothing important, just whatever came to mind. Then we both noticed it. Out in the hallway, a light flicked on. Not the harsh brightness of the ceiling light, but a softer, glowing light, like it was spilling out from one of the connecting rooms. At first, we thought it was Grandpa getting up to grab a drink. We leaned over to get a better look. It wasn't him. Something was moving toward us. It wasn't shaped exactly like a person, no clear head or arms, but it was about as tall as a grown man. It was made entirely of light, pure white gold light, and it was pulsing, like it was breathing in slow motion. It didn't flicker like a bad bulb or shift like a flashlight beam. It moved with purpose, steady and slow. My brother reached to his nightstand, grabbed his pocket knife, and flicked it open. He just held it there. We didn't move toward the door, didn't even speak. I felt frozen, not in a paralyzing fear, but in that strange way you feel when something is so unusual you can't quite process it. My heart was pounding, but I was more curious than anything else, like I was watching something that wasn't supposed to exist, and I needed to see what it would do next. It came closer until it reached the very end of the hall right next to Grandpa's bedroom door. Then in the blink of an eye, it was gone. No fade out, no flicker, just gone as if someone had flipped a switch. A few seconds later, Grandpa's door creaked open. He stepped out, rubbing his eyes, and asked why we were turning the lights on and off. He said he'd seen the glow from the crack under his door. My brother told him exactly what had just happened. Grandpa didn't look surprised, not even a little. He just nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting it. Then he said he'd seen the same thing before, more than once. Sometimes it would appear while he was watching TV, just standing in the hallway, pulsing, and then vanishing again. He said it never made a sound, never caused anything to move or shift. Just light. Years later, when I was older, Grandpa told me the rest. The man who lived in the house before us had been struggling badly with depression. One night alone in that same hallway, he'd taken a shotgun and ended his life. I've always been a skeptic. I don't buy into every ghost story I hear, but what I saw that night, I can't explain away. I was awake. My brother was awake. We saw the same thing. And the strange part is, it didn't leave me afraid. At this age, I was already thinking about what happens after we die, and the thought of nothing forever made my stomach turn. Seeing that light made me believe, even just a little, that there's something after we're gone. I haven't seen it since, but once was enough. When I was 11, my family moved across the country into this massive, creaky old house. My parents said it was full of character, which was their way of justifying the fact that it was over 100 years old, built in the 1890s, according to the realtor. The floors dipped in places, the doors didn't quite shut right, and the upstairs always smelled faintly like dust and something metallic. The very first night there, none of my stuff was unpacked yet. The TV wasn't even hooked up, so I dragged out my keyboard from its box to kill some time before bed. I set it up in my room, right near the middle where the floor felt the most solid, and started pecking out this awful song I'd learned in music class. About halfway through, I got this weird chill. Not just goosebumps, but that deep, sinking cold that crawls up the back of your neck. I glanced up, and across the room was a big old window. It was dark outside, so the glass was basically a mirror. I could see my reflection, hunched over the keyboard, and right behind me, clear as day, was an old woman. She was standing just over my shoulder, her head slightly tilted, hands clasped in front of her, like she was waiting for something. She wasn't moving. I didn't look twice. I bolted down the stairs, screaming for my mom. She brushed it off, said I was just overtired or spooked because of the move. I wanted to believe her, but I knew what I saw. Over the 7 years we lived in that house, I saw her 3 more times. The first was about a year later. I was heading downstairs at night for a glass of water, and halfway down the staircase, I froze. She was there, coming down toward me, one step at a time. Her eyes didn't blink. She didn't say a word. She just stared at me the entire time. I backed up until I was at the top again, and when I blinked, she was gone. The other 2 times were in the spare bedroom, catty corner from mine. That room always felt colder than the rest of the upstairs. Once, I was looking for wrapping paper in the closet and saw her face peeking out from between a rack of hanging clothes in the far corner. The second time, she was standing in the exact same spot, just slightly leaning out from behind the coats, like she was watching. And then there was the nightly stuff. I'd be lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I'd hear the creak of the threshold. Always the same sound, like someone had just stepped into the room. Then soft, deliberate footsteps would circle my bed. They'd go past my desk, into the tiny dressing room attached to my bedroom, linger there for a few seconds, and then walk back out the same way. Sometimes I'd convince myself it was the house settling, but a few nights I woke up to something else entirely. This icy, faint breath against my face, like someone was leaning down just inches away. Years later, I found out from a neighbor that a woman had died in the house in the 1960s. Not violently, apparently from some long illness, but the room she spent most of her time in. The same room I slept in for years. I don't really believe in ghosts anymore. At least that's what I tell myself. But no matter how I try to explain it, I can still picture her face in that window, and I can still feel that cold breath on my cheek like it just happened last night.